There's something startling about the Skoda Kodiaq, or rather, the space it fills in. B-segment sedans have their death warrant signed by SUVs like the Ford Endeavour and Toyota Fortuner. They're both really capable, of course, but they don't really offer you the same experience of luxury. They can handle the rough stuff pretty well too, but for the most part, owners are paying for capabilities that they'll never really use. So how is it that nobody's thought of offering a balance? SUV presence and capability with luxury sedan opulence. The Skoda Kodiaq promises to be just that, a balance of both worlds, and we're driving it to see how it lives up to the expectations. But let's start off with the cool and quirky bits first. So you get simple and thoughtful touches like this. A plastic door protector. Very simple mechanism to include in the door, and it's very thoughtful but serves a very important purpose. What if you've got a wall or a car that's too close? You don't want to get a scratch on your door, nor do you want to damage the property outside. Simple touch, but very effective. Then you get cool but functional bits like this. All LED lighting. So the tail light, the reverse light, the daytime running LED, the low beam, the cornering fog light, the high beam, and the indicator are all LEDs. Then you get this, umbrellas in both the front doors. Skoda branded, of course, and it's not just storage. There's drainage too. So what if you've got your hands filled with luggage and you need to load up the boot? Little tricky, right? Not really. And once you've loaded up and you're done with the task, just press and hold. So this is of course a 7-seater, and with all 3 seat rows up, you've got 270 litres of boot space. But if you need to put in more, all you have to do is tug on these, drop down the 50-50 split third row seats for 630 litres of boot space. And in case you lose something in the night, that boot light is not just a boot light. Pinch on either side and you've got yourself a flashlight. And if you are looking to move a ski rack or maybe a refrigerator, just tug on the straps on either end of the second row seats and you've got 2005 litres of boot space. Of course, you're not buying a 7-seater for warehouse duties alone. The third row is usable, but it's still a third row. Getting in isn't perfectly convenient since the second row folds down and slides forward but doesn't tumble. Once in, your knees do point skyward, and though headroom and knee room are decent, they're still decent for a third row. This spot is for kids or short adults, preferably over short journeys, which is why a big or tall person trying to get into this spot will be far from graceful. But fortunately, you do have airbags even here, as well as a nicely integrated set of 3-point seat belts. And then you have my favorite quirk of all, what Skoda likes to call the power nap pack, with good reason. So it begins with this, a blanket holder along with the blanket itself of course, and on the side you've got manual sun blinds for the second row. Nice but not unique. But the best bit is this. These lateral support beams. They work something like a neck brace, so whenever there's any undulations or bad roads that come up, the lateral movement is not going to knock you away from your nap. If only airlines had this too. Of course, it's not just about the quirks. There's also sensibility, there's space, there's luxury, and there's practicality. So with the front driver's seat set to a position of someone who's 5'10", I've got decent knee room, I've got adequate headroom even with the sunroof. The seat is properly supportive, there's good under-thigh support, back support as well, and of course the aforementioned power nap pack. Apart from that, you've also got adequate space to tuck your feet underneath, and it is wide enough for 3 occupants. Then of course there's a sense of luxury, and the quality is immaculate to say the least. There's simply no gap, you can't really fault the plastics. You've got nice leather touches around over here, and it just feels like you're sitting in a proper German luxury SUV. To state the obvious, there are features to boot too. So you have the rear zone of the 3-zone climate control down here with vents only over here, not in the pillars or in the third row for that matter. You've also got a properly large panoramic sunroof. The front section folds out, but this bit is fixed. And you have a great touchscreen infotainment system. But I can't control it from here, or can I? With the Skoda Boss Connect app, I can. And of course, you've got this great touchscreen infotainment system. It's not unfamiliar. You've seen a similar setup inside the Skoda Octavia, and it's got a great number of connectivity options. So apart from the usual aux, USB and Bluetooth, you've got Apple CarPlay, you've got Android Auto and MirrorLink from the SmartLink connectivity that Skoda offers. Apart from that, it also gives you the option of controlling various vehicle functions, including the ambient lighting, and it comes paired with an impeccable Canton audio system. And it's not just great for music. They've got a nice quirk here too. So the microphone, it picks up the audio from the front seat, relays it through the speakers into the rear rows so they can hear you better. So you've even got thoughtful and useful storage spaces like the dual glove boxes, with the lower one being cooled as well. And of course, you've got powered front seats, both with the memory function. But unlike the Skoda Superb, you don't have ventilated seats. Outside, the Skoda Kodiaq does look like a legit SUV, but even so, because of certain elements like the sleek stance, it does come across in certain parts like an estate. And it's kind of a mixed bag on the inside too. So yes, you do have this very commanding driving position. It overlooks the bonnet almost completely, and you've got a great world view, so judgment even in tight corners, not really a problem. But even so, you're cocooned behind the dashboard like you would be in a sedan. Now, one thing that has to stand out about this SUV is its luxury factor, and that begins with refinement. And on that front, in terms of vibration and harshness, managed really well. There aren't any vibes that come through any part of the car, even at a standstill. But the noise levels aren't really controlled perfectly well. I mean, sure, you can cover them up by firing up the AC and maybe using the music system too. But it is audible inside the cabin. And even though this is the same engine you get in the Skoda Superb in a higher state of tune, it does seem a bit noisier in the Kodiaq. What's one really appreciable point about this SUV is something that traditionally isn't a strong point for SUVs at all: the ride quality. So it's not excessively stiff or bumpy, and that's one part where it's almost sedan-like. That almost bit is an important word, and I'll tell you why. So for the most part, when you're on good roads like this one, where it's nice and smooth, the suspension has that Euro car-like ride. So it's very flat, very compliant, and there's no vertical bobbing as such. At the same time, when you go over, say, expansion joints or smaller potholes, you can hear that thunking through the suspension. You can't feel it as much as you can hear it. But once you come across undulations, that's where it starts to become more SUV-like. So it's not perfectly flat through uneven sections, and you can feel quite a bit of the side-to-side movement. Drivability is no issue, of course. You've got an ample amount of low-end torque, 340 Nm in this case, and the lightest throttle inputs are enough to get you up to city speeds. It even goes up to 100 km an hour without much stress, but by nature, this isn't an engine that likes to be rushed. You need to take your time with it, just enjoy a light cruise, and don't really push it too hard, because it is capable of hitting high speeds quickly, but it doesn't do so too willingly. So even if you're looking at low speed overtakes and say you go a little heavy on the A pedal, it doesn't really sound all that willing to pick up the pace. And the crude nature of the engine kind of shines through. It is a refined motor otherwise, but when you push it, that clatteriness, it just becomes quite ungainly. Underpowered? No, not even close. It just leaves you wanting for a bit more ferocity. But what you won't want for is a more responsive transmission. The 7-speed DSG is easily one of the best in the business. Miles quicker than the Fortuner or Endeavour ATs, while offering smoother shift quality too. And finally, we come to the drive modes. 5 of them in this case. So you have Eco, which is probably something I'd suggest you stick to only if you're chauffeur driven, because even in the city, the throttle response is very dull in that mode, and for obvious reasons, it's meant for efficiency. But otherwise, if you're driving yourself, for the most part, you can just stick to normal mode. You've got good enough and smooth enough throttle response in that, and it works in the city, but it just about gets the job done on the highway. For that, I would recommend Sport mode. The Sport mode doesn't really make the Kodiaq a lot sportier per se. It just makes it more responsive, and it's particularly important if you're looking at high-speed overtakes. But even in that mode, revving the engine hard, there's just no point to it. Just take it easy, stick to around 2 to 3000 RPM and you're good. Of course, if you are looking at a properly sporty drive, you can use the paddle shifters or even the Tiptonic option from the gear lever. And you also have the individual and snow driving modes. Individual is something you can use to selectively adapt the steering and the powertrain as per your preferences. And snow mode, it's probably not a mode you'll be using very often, but it can also work in slush and muck, conditions with low traction in essence. Bear in mind though that this is a premium SUV with some all-terrain capability, not the other way around. With this 188mm of ground clearance, 140 when it's loaded up, and all-wheel drive, it'll get you out of a sticky or slushy situation or deal with a road trip to Ladakh, no hassle. Just don't go signing up for any off-roading competitions in this. The Kodiaq does have the size appeal, but in an understated and classier fashion than we're used to. The ND and Fortuner have the muscular and intimidating aura of a bouncer, while the Kodiaq looks like the chiseled lad you'd see in a premium garment advert. It does look like a slightly scaled down Audi Q7, which of course works for it. Its sharp body lines are a direct lift from the Superb, as is the concave effect you see on the lower half of the doors. Some traditional elements like the squarish wheel arches remain, but at the same time, because of the sleek stance, it does look quite wagon-like from the side. In fact, were it not for the ground clearance and big 18-inch wheels, this could pass off as a big estate. But as we've seen from Skoda, especially the newer lot, this is one handsome piece of machinery. So should you consider giving this big bear a hug? Well, yes. Whether you're looking for a more premium and luxurious alternative to traditional 7-seater SUVs in the segment or a more value for money alternative to big badge 5-seater SUVs, the Kodiaq does for SUVs what the Superb did for business sedans. We're not expecting a very aggressive price placement, but that's exactly how we describe the product's packaging. The Kodiaq feels properly premium, comes loaded with features including 9 airbags, and still puts practicality as one of its core pillars.